So in this video I just want to go through some of the main demand and supply side factors that can impact external stability. So when you hear the word external stability, you're talking about maintaining a current account deficit below 6% of our GDP, so keeping the CAD down, a sustainable net foreign debt, generally below 60% of our GDP, and a stable dollar. So what we're talking about is how can each of these factors impact those goals. So firstly, consumer confidence. Basically, anytime you're getting something that's talking about increased spending in Australia, so anything that's going to cause increased spending by Australians is going to cause increased spending by Australians on imports. So when consumers are confident, they're more likely to spend more of their income and savings ratios decrease, which will lead to an increased spending on imports. Around 20% of our incomes are spent on imports, which will lead to more debits in the balance of merchandise trade and net services sections of the CAD, which may increase net foreign debt and depreciate the dollar because there'll be more supply of the Australian. When you're explaining the relationship between the CAD and net foreign debt, it's not enough to just say the higher CAD will lead to more net foreign debt. You need to clearly articulate that a higher CAD needs to be funded. We fund this via either borrowing money or selling off equity or assets, which leads to higher net foreign liabilities. If we decide to borrow, then it leads to increased net foreign debt. Make sure you clearly summarise that the relationship between the two, rather than just saying higher CAD, higher net foreign debt. Interest rates, I'm not going to go through all of these, so just the main ones, but interest rates, higher interest rates, if interest rates increase, that can be good for the CAD because higher interest rates reduce our demand for imports. When we've got higher interest rates, we have less discretionary income. Consumers also prefer to save rather than spend because they're getting a higher return on their savings and less of a return on any, they have to pay more interest on any debt. So higher interest rates are good for the CAD because they reduce spending, and therefore that leads to reduced debits in the balance of merchandise trade and net services accounts, which can help to reduce the CAD and reduce pressure on net foreign debt. But on the flip side, higher interest rates can also be bad for the CAD. The reason for that is when we have higher interest rates, investors overseas are attracted by the high returns or the high and that attracts capital inflow. So what can happen is the Australian dollar can appreciate as a result of that increase in capital inflow, and that can actually worsen Australia's international competitiveness and our net exports. So it's good because it reduces spending. It's bad because it can lead to an appreciation of the dollar. Lower interest rates are the complete opposite. It's bad because people have got more discretionary income, so they import more, but it's also good because the dollar is likely to depreciate rather than appreciate. Overseas economic conditions. Okay, the faster we're growing overseas, the more demand there is for our exports. So if there's stronger growth overseas, it leads to more demand for capital items like raw materials, like our iron ore and our coal, which leads to higher commodity prices. It also helps to increase demand for things like tourism and education, which also helps to boost the amount of credits in the net services account. So as a result, the increase in exports can help boost the terms of trade because of higher commodity prices, and all of this will help reduce the size of the current account deficit. The other thing you may want to mention is strong growth overseas can lead to inflation overseas. So the other thing that can happen is we might import less because things cost more overseas because of inflation, and again that means there's less debits in the current account. The exchange rate, we talked about this in the last video, but when our dollar depreciates, exports become more competitive, so we export more and we import less. That helps to reduce the current account deficit because of the more credits and less debits in the balance of merchandise trade. In terms of the negatives, a depreciating Australian dollar can mean that if we have paying interest on our net foreign debt, then any debt that's denominated in foreign currency, we're going to be paying more interest on because they want a certain amount of interest in their currency. If our dollar depreciates, we have to pay them more interest. So overall, it can have both good and bad impacts. It can be good for the balance of merchandise trade, but bad for net primary income. And on the whole, as a whole, it helps to reduce the current account deficit because the good impact is stronger when the dollar depreciates. On the flip side, the impact that a higher CAD can have on the dollar. So a higher CAD can mean the value of the dollar goes down because it becomes more risky to invest in Australia, so there's more capital outflow and less capital inflow, and therefore that leads to a depreciation of the dollar when the CAD is high. Disposable incomes, basically the higher disposable income we have, the more we spend on imports, about 20%, which leads to a higher CAD and therefore leads to more net foreign liabilities. Lower income tax rates is, again, a tricky one because there's two different effects. In terms of the bad, lower income tax rates again increase our disposable income, which means that we might spend more on goods and services overseas, which leads to more debits in the balance of merchandise trade and net services because we've got more money. So we might go on more foreign holidays, we might buy more imports, might buy more jumpers from overseas, which can all lead to a higher current account deficit. The good thing is, and just be mindful that the bad outweighs the good, so the overall impact of lower income taxes will be to increase the CAD, but it can have some benefits for supplier. When taxes are lower, it helps to boost participation rates and boost labour productivity because more people join the workforce because of the lower taxes. This helps to keep inflation down and promotes our international competitiveness, which boosts net exports and helps to reduce the CAD. So it can have some supply side benefits, but overall it's generally negative for the CAD when lower income tax rates. A higher terms of trade means that we can purchase more imports for any given volume of exports, but more importantly, the average price of exports means they're increasing faster than the average price of imports. And because the demand for our exports is quite inelastic, it means that the total amount of value we're getting for our exports will be higher. There will be more credits in the balance of merchandise trade section of the CAD because the total value of exports will go up because of the inelastic nature of our exports. From an import perspective, again, most of our imports are intermediate goods which have quite a low elasticity of demand, home time. Therefore, that can lead to less spent on imports because they're cheaper and the demand doesn't increase too much, so the total amount of debits goes down. In terms of supply side factors, most of these are pretty much exactly the same, so I just want to flick through a couple of them. Just in relation to these first four, it's all related to lower costs of production, which boosts demand for our exports and reduces import spending, which all helps the current account. Climatic conditions, poor climatic conditions increase the price of our agricultural products. They reduce our productive capacity and make us less internationally competitive, which can hurt the CAD. And finally, demographic changes. Okay, one of the problems with an ageing population is that we have a decrease in participation rates. This decreases the competition for jobs and can cause wages to go up because of skill shortages. Those wages increase production costs for firms and make businesses less competitive, so they can hurt the CAD. Skilled immigration has the opposite effect. It helps to boost participation and lower costs of production, which is good for the CAD. Thank you.